Hello and welcome back to Vox Mundi's third Victoria 2 conversion update video. In this video I will show you what I can of what I've done. Most of what I've been working on is behind the scenes stuff, things that will happen during the game, that I can do no more than just tell you, and show you in already completed Observer games. So I've been running quite a few Observer games, I've saved a few of them for you to see. But first of all, I'm going to start by showing you some of the stuff I've done that you can actually see. I have been transferring a lot of flags. Of course, this flag is from the flag pack in the Victoria 2 converter, but most of these flags, like Jämtland, we have Valois, we have the Latin Commonwealth, we have Great Baghdad, Castile, all of these. I've transferred the flags from EU4, and I've made variants of them for fascists and communists and etc. So hopefully we can see some of them in the game itself. Unfortunately, I think that only a small percentage of all of them will ever be seen when playing an actual game. It's unfortunate, but I'll see what I can do about making some of them appear myself. And for the nations that didn't have flags, like for example Pampas, I made a flag based on the parent nation. So Pampas has a Castilian derivative, Cajamarca has a Sevillan derivative, Tejas, another Castilian derivative, etc. And like the CLN, I made some flags for them. So this is their default flag with a giant that they had on their flag in EU4. And most nations will have the flags you expect them to have. I've made some new ones for Sibir, or I didn't make them, I took them from the Immortals. Yes, they have the Immortals, because they had a ship on their flag, and that was the only one that really didn't fit at all. So I replaced it. And I've also edited all the names. Only a few nations have new names right off the bat, but most of them will have unique names when they turn fascist or communist or turn into democracies or republics. So to symbolize Sheng's nature here, it's called the Sheng Republican Empire, because they are, for some reason, an absolute monarchy when they convert over. Actually, they were a monarchy, but they were... I think uncivilized nations cannot be anything except for an absolute monarchy in Victoria 2. So I'm not entirely sure. In any case, I've made flags and I've made names for every single nation that had a random flag and a plain old boring name. So that took quite some time. But I've been doing more than that. I have been adding some more cultural union nations. Most of them, actually, I think all of them are in play from the very start. It is nations like Great Moravia, the Latin Commonwealth, we have Jämtland, Dacia, and the Mamluks, etc. So if they turn into great powers and sphere nations of their own culture group, they will be able to annex them. I don't think we'll be seeing much of that, except for the obvious ones in Pisa and Fes. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a seldom seen feature, unfortunately. A minor update to the Great Moravian split. The nations that split now hate each other from the very start, so they will probably go to war. It's going to be interesting to see. And Pruthenia, as you may know, is the nation that spawns in the north here. If they get wrecked in a war, they will shatter once again. So Great Moravia can shatter once, but Pruthenia can shatter one more time after that. Releasing all the German minors, they will release Sjælland and a republic here in the north, etc. It's quite fun, and if they get wrecked, it's actually hard to wreck them. You need to have them disarmed or have them have maximum war exhaustion and not be a great power at the same time. Then they will shatter. Anyway, Great Baghdad here, I talked about this last time, I believe, but if Great Baghdad colonizes almost all of Africa, they have a small chance to release the entirety of Africa as a satellite state. And the satellite state gains cores on everything. So it's not very likely to happen, but if it does, Africa may turn into a great power. or they may just completely collapse, as I've seen in some of my test games. Some more changes. Yes, the CLN and Vinland here have the power to annex natives if they are great powers and have them in their sphere. This is unique to them, no one else can do it. And, well, usually Blackfoot and Cheyenne get annexed, but Iroquois is rarely annexed, actually. They are annexed sometimes, but they are quite hard to have in your sphere because they are powerful. Yeah, at the start of the game, a coalition will form consisting of the CLN, Tejas, and all the native states against Vinland. Vinland starts out... They don't start out as a great power, but they become a great power almost immediately after Seville is crushed. They will rocket up to the top. So in the early game, the CLN and Tejas will defend against the Jarldom of Vinland. Some more stuff. Yeah, speaking of annexations, if Moravia is very powerful and Ragusa, that is released here, is very weak, like if they get attacked by the Latin Commonwealth, then Moravia can annex them by having them in their sphere. It usually doesn't happen unless they are reduced to one region. But I added it in to reduce the amount of border gore in this particular area, which should look good after a while. I can show you some examples later on. Yeah, this is another interesting one, because people requested the border gore in the British Isles to be lessened. If Valois is weakened quite heavily, if they suffer a lot of war exhaustion and lose a lot of land, then they will lose their British territories. And the British territories will split off into North Anglia, they will split off into Anglia, Cornwall, I believe, Scotland, Northland may get some stuff. Let me try to click on it. Yeah, here it is. Northland may get this. And when they have lost it, a lot of other events can trigger. Or more specifically, Antalam Faith has an event that allows them to gain cores on everything they've held historically in the British Isles. No other events are triggered by the split itself, but it does hasten along other events. I will not go into detail on that, but most events use the Great Moravian Split, the Valois secession, etc. as triggers to speed up what's coming. Some more stuff. I have a little list here I'm reading off. Yeah, indeed, I added a civil war to the CLN. So, if the CLN is a great power, not if they're a secondary power, they need to be a great power. They can have a rebellion called Griffin Rebellion, and that will split them in two, the North and the South. And the South is a republic, a democracy, a liberal democracy called the Rose Republic in Irish. And they will fight to the death here. It's based entirely on the American Civil War event, so so far the CLN seems to win almost all the time, but I don't know what I can do to make it more even. So instead of making it more even, I made it so that if the CLN wins, they will still suffer the effects of the war. They will slowly become more and more liberal until they may switch to a liberal government, and if they do, they'll turn into a democracy. So that is the aftermath of the Griffin Rebellion if it fails. If it succeeds, well, then it turns into the Rose Republic instead, and will be a liberal democracy right off the bat. Is there something more here? Oh yeah, the Latin Commonwealth became quite powerful in most of my test games. They usually became more powerful than Moravia, and I wanted to keep them as powerful as Moravia, not more powerful. So, if the Latin Commonwealth becomes too powerful, as in it's a great power and it owns most of this area, like southern France and northern Spain here, then they have a chance to get an event which releases the Acovitavian nation. This is a nation based on the fictitious culture that appeared in Crusader Kings 2, which is a mix of most things. It's Spanish Jews, it's French Gnostic Christians, there's Mediterranean peoples, there's everything. There's some Sunni and Sikh Muslims and some... What are they called? The Zoroastrian branch that was down here. It's everything is in the Acovitavian Union. So it may release that nation here in this area, and the more they have expanded, the more powerful the Acovitavian nation will be. And it's an interesting nation, and I hope to see it in-game. Hopefully it will trigger. It may not trigger if the Latin Commonwealth is absolutely destroyed at the start. But it's a nice counterweight to the Latin Commonwealth becoming too powerful. Right, so some minor stuff. I added a decision to the CLN to abandon all their cores in Scandinavia. They usually never try to take them anyway, so they can gain some prestige by abandoning them. The AI will do so if they have a high consciousness. So, for some grand things I've changed changed how migration works quite a lot, actually. I looked at several mods to see how people moved and stuff like that. So, most people that emigrate will emigrate en masse to the American nations. More specifically, they will immigrate to great powers, like the CLN. If they turn into great power, they like to immigrate to Texas or Tejas and the South American nations. They do not like Vinland for some reason, unless Vinland becomes a great power. It works really well, and it turns the CLN to a superpower in the late game if they don't if they aren't dismantled in a war. Then they lose out on almost all the immigration. And Australia had a lot of immigration before, but seeing as they're not a colonial nation of one of these people prefer to go to the Americas rather than Oceania. Also, there's almost no one living here, so when they got immigration, they outnumbered the original population almost immediately. It was absolutely silly, so I just removed it, or lessened it. It's as much possibility for people to immigrate to Australia as to anywhere else in Europe, Asia, or Africa. So, let me show you some of the games I've been observing to test my events and such. This is the latest one, and it contains everything I've mentioned. I use Funj as the observing nation, usually. In this game, Africa was released, and it also stayed together, but it didn't become a great power, so it's basically just an extension of Great Baghdad. In this game, as far as I remember, because I watched most of it, the Latin Commonwealth was incredibly powerful up until the very end, very end, where it lost a great war and a lot of territory to Valois and Moravia. The same goes for Antalam Faith here, that lost Scotland and a lot of territory to Anglia at the very end. Otherwise they had almost everything. Same with the Commonwealth, they had almost all of Valois. And as you can see here, here's the Acovitavian nation. It doesn't have its name visible here right now, but it's the Republic of Acovitavia, because they turned into a bourgeoisie dictatorship. And as you can see here, Bithynia failed, and they shattered into Hanover and Thuringia and Pomerania and Sjælland, and got some of its territories stolen back by Moravia. Jämtland didn't do anything. Lithuania is nothing more than a secondary power. It's a very interesting world. It really, after Great Wars got invented, things got really heated here. I can tell you that. But Great Moravia came out on the top. Actually, Moravia. And they are #1. As you can see here, the CLN is great power #6. Unfortunately, Vinland is only a civilized nation. Nothing much happens in South America, pretty much ever. In Asia, we have the Shahardom of Sibir that ate into the Shang Republican Empire. They don't do this usually, but the reason why they did that is because the Republican Empire never managed to westernize. They are still a partially westernized nation. Oh, and I forgot to talk about this. This is an important point, by the way. I didn't really know what to do with the rest of the world, but I wanted them to have a great chance to thrive. So what I did is I added in the possibility for every single uncivilized nation to potentially take a Meiji Reformation-like decision. And the Meiji Reformation is usually reserved for Japan, which gives them a lot of research and some permanent research bonuses. And an uncivilized nation can take it if they are friends with a great power and the great power has them in their sphere. Unfortunately, Sheng wasn't anyone's friend, and they got so many reactionaries that rolled back all they had done time and time again, so I'm surprised that they are still here at all. On the other hand, the Mamluks westernized almost immediately. Unfortunately, they didn't turn into a great power. But mostly because of Valois, that holds all of these colonial possessions here, blocking the Mamluks. You can see that most of these nations are indeed civilized. It's only the Sheng Republic that didn't have time to. Even their colony, Suidanshu, got to westernize. So, I'll just load into this game real quick. I'll show you the great powers, and then I'll show you some other games. The great powers here were Moravia, followed by Great Baghdad. As you can see here, it's not really a competition between number 1 and number 2 here, because Great Moravia has 4,000 industrial capacity. And the reason why others don't have more is because there have been 3 great wars, I think, or 2 great wars, where Moravia has won both of them, and there have been a lot of dismantling of factories everywhere. So they are really not that powerful, that it says, and they've also lost some wars, so don't worry, they are pretty balanced. And number 3 is the Shardom of Sibir, and then we have the Communist Commonwealth of Latin Workers, followed by the Anglian Republic. The Anglians really have a possibility to resurge, for real. They have a lot of industry down in South Africa, but if they regain the British Isles, they gain so much industry. It's insane. The CLN, oh yeah, the Anglians are a fascist democracy. Very interesting. We have the CLN, that have turned into a liberal great power. This is, actually, the last event I added was for them to turn into a democracy after they turned liberal, so probably they just... This was before I added in that event. Otherwise they would have been a democracy a long time ago. Then we have the Sephardim People's Republic, which is Castile, a proletarian dictatorship. After the last Great War, a lot of nations turned into communist dictatorships for some reason. It's very fun, actually. It's fun to see some of the flags I made. And then we have Valois. Valois may get completely destroyed, or they can cling to a great power status all game. It all depends on if they have a chance to build up their industry or not. So let me show you some other games here. Some more finished observer games. I may not load into them, but I want to show them nonetheless. For every game I show you here, there's a few events missing. So this one, for example, did not have the Prothenia Shatters event. But as you can see, this world looks quite different. We have a much more powerful Latin Commonwealth. We have a Valois that is not a great power. Castile is more powerful. We have a free Cardox. This is my favorite. They got released in a crisis. Africa did not spawn. Fes is still around. This is because Great Baghdad was actually kicked off the great power position at the start of the game. So they only became a great power at the end. They didn't even have time to annex Fes. And here we have a secondary power in the form of the Sheng Republican Empire. It went much better for them this time. Valois expanded in another way. It seems they took this from the Mamluks. Is there anything else interesting to show you? Yes, the CLN, a great power, number 4 here. Much more powerful. So, let me show you some other games. I have at least 2 more, I believe. Yeah, here. Mutapa. Unfortunately, Victoria 2 does not have a proper observe command, which I find to be quite bad. So here Africa got released, But Africa broke away from Great Baghdad by becoming a great power, and then they fell from great power status. But still, this nation is not to be trifled with. The Latin Commonwealth, before I added in that Covetavia split, a bit powerful. Also, we have Great Sydköln here, because they turned into fascist dictatorship. Moravia, great power, but they're getting wrecked, because they lost several great wars. Anglia resurging. We have Jämtland that turned into a fascist state for a while there and took a lot of land from Lithuania. It was very interesting to see. Otherwise, not much here. Oh yeah, Shang became a great power in this. They became a great power, and yeah, they stayed as a great power for a long time, and they sure had a lot of influence in crises. They even sent troops over to America in crisis here. As you can see here, it's a very shapely CLN, because they bashed down on the Republic of Vinland. A great power, number 5 this time. So, I should have one more game. Yes, Ceylon. So this is the furthest back, not a lot of events here. Oh yeah, in this one, the Great Moravia Shatters event never happened. They managed to keep themselves together enough to not trigger the event. That is incredibly unlikely, but they did. So you can see, they stayed at number 1 for pretty much all the game. Africa spawned, but Africa got torn apart by rebels, as you can see here. There's rebels everywhere, just tearing them to pieces. So I think I've come a long way since these first save games here, with the newest one reflecting something of what I would like to see when I'm playing it myself. So I believe that I'm pretty close to being able to play this now, but if you have any last suggestions for me to add in, preferably quick things, then I can do that before I start playing. But yeah, I feel satisfied. If I've forgotten something, then please remind me in the comments. I do have an Excel sheet, but sometimes it's hard to follow it when there's several suggestions in the same comment post, because I just copy-paste the comments directly into the sheet. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll return shortly with the actual game.